Hey everyone, Sandy here with first of a tips and tricks for Dayz video series. Been playing the game for a little while now, have been having a lot of fun and learned a bunch of things along the way, so thought I'd go ahead and just share some of that knowledge with you guys, get you guys up and running a little bit faster here, hopefully. First tip is going to be configuring your video settings. This obviously has a huge impact on gameplay and usability of the game, so thought it'd be good to just kind of go through those video settings and let you know what I think of them and what I typically set mine to. Now, bear in mind, your computer will probably be completely different than my machine here, so my settings won't necessarily work for you, but I'll show you how I go ahead and tweak those settings and get to something that's usable for me. And what I'd suggest is, before you get started, go ahead and install an application that'll measure your frame rate, so your FPS value. I use an application called Fraps, which I've found works really well for me, but feel free to use whichever application works well for you. Once you've got your frame rate counter installed, go ahead and fire up Dayz. And right at the main menu here, one of the nice things is they're actually using the game engine, the graphics engine for the game, to render the main menu. So you can actually make some configuration changes and see what those effects have on your rendering and on your frames per second right here in game. One of the better menus or the scenes to use is this one right here by the car with the apartments in the background, just because there's a lot of 3D geometry going on and so on and so forth. This is the one that I found is puts the biggest load on my particular machine. You can cycle through the different scenes just by clicking the change server button and then canceling out of that, and that'll give you a new scene. So once you've got something you like, some settings you like, you can try it in different environments and see what that's going to do for you without necessarily having to run around in game and pause while you change your video settings and expose yourself. So really nice little tool here to do that. So right away, let's go in, get into it. We're going to be looking at the video settings here, and I'm running at 1920 by 1080, which is native resolution for my monitor and my laptop. So obviously, if you can run at native resolution, that's your best bet. If you can't quite get the performance you want, and you've optimized everything else to where you like it, then this is kind of your fallback. You can lower the resolution. Lowering it too much, though, means at a distance you're going to have a hard time distinguishing objects, distinguishing players, zombies, things like that. So obviously you want to try to run this as high as you can, if you can. Brightness and gamma is something we'll cover in another tip here, but right now I just keep those at default values for now. VSync, I keep that enabled. I haven't really seen much of a difference one way or the other, so I just go ahead and keep it. User interface, there's nothing here that's really going to affect you from performance wise, so you just set that to whatever looks good and feels right for you. Textures, this one doesn't have the texture detail. I found hasn't really given me much of an impact on frames per second, so I put that to normal just to conserve a little bit of video memory. And texture filtering, though, I have found that does have a bit of an effect, so cranking this up a little too much can go ahead and give me a bit of performance hit, but at this point I keep that on low. Seems to work well for me. Quality is this menu here. We're going to start seeing a little bit more effect here. Objects on the background, for example, trees and buildings and stuff like that, I've got that set to normal. If I go anywhere lower, like low or even very low, what I've found is you'll notice here we had a bit of a change, and on low, the trees, from low to normal, the trees and the buildings kind of change in the background. That switch happens in game, and what I found is anything below normal, the switch happens at a range where it's very visually I see it very much, so it affects me in game. I see changes to the scene, and it kind of distracts me from what's going on. So having that set to normal gives me that right balance of quality, and it doesn't create a distraction in game. Terrain, this one is one which it looks very good on normal. You've got all the trees and little bushes and stuff like that. Something to be said for going low or even very low is you're seeing the range at which a lot of these details are added in the game changes. On low, we get across the street. On normal, we actually get stuff beyond close to the apartment here. One of the, again, this is, it switches in and out of the game, and on anything below normal, it becomes a bit visually striking. But at the same time, keep in mind, players at range, this stuff gets clipped out of the scene, right? So if you think you're nice and hidden because you're prone beside this car behind this little bush, and the other player's got this set to very low just to get the maximum frames per second out of his machine, you're not hidden at all. So try to stay behind at least, decent sized bushes or things of a little bit more substance than some of the grass and some of the details that you've got going on in game. Clouds and shadows, well, you can't turn those off completely. I found that it changes the game visually so much. Like this, it's fine, there's no problem with this, but when you're beside buildings and stuff like that, it's just so much nicer to have the shadows and everything else in the game. It just makes it look so much better. So I take the performance hit and have those shadows turned on, but that's my personal preference. Rendering is the other area which you can have a huge effect on both performance and gameplay. A lot of people will recommend turning off bloom and rotation blur, and I'll be one of those as well. I've turned those off since I've installed the game and haven't really looked back since, so I just keep my settings that way. Anti-aliasing, turning this on will give you a couple of frame per second hits, so I go ahead and I turn that off. Alpha to coverage right now is disabled with no other options, so there's nothing you can do there. And this is on the 0.49 build on the experimental branch at the moment. Edge smoothing, this one, again, depending on what you go for, you'll get a couple of frame per second hits, so if your machine can handle it, fine, but otherwise I just go ahead and turn that off. HDR quality, I really don't see much of a difference between the low and the very low settings, either from a frame per second or quality perspective, so I just go ahead and err on the side of caution and go very low on that. Ambient occlusion, again, at this point, doesn't look like it really does anything, and at this point I just keep that disabled. But the post-process quality, this one I want to spend a little time talking about, because right now I've got that disabled, and what it does, it's depth of field blur. So what it'll do is further stuff gets out, it's going to blur them out. So right now even these far apartments are nice and crisp, but you do see rough edges because of the pixelation, the anti-aliasing and stuff like that. So you can go ahead and even turn that on very low. Actually very low is not going to do anything here. Let's go ahead and just put that on normal, and you see what happens. Yes, there's no rough edges anymore, but look at that blur. If there's a sniper sitting in that window here, you're not going to see him. So, and there will be snipers sitting in those windows or on the roof. So you want to go ahead and turn that down. I just go ahead and disable it all the way. It just gives you a much crisper, much cleaner view. That's my personal preference, and plus it does have a bit of an effect on your frame rate, so turning that off is just going to make the game much more playable for you. Well, that's it, guys, for this very first tip in what I hope will be a nice long series of videos for you guys. I hope you liked it. If you did and you learned something, then go ahead and click the like button. It helps a lot. If you'd like to see something in particular, you've got a question about Dayz, you'd like to have answered, you're not sure about something, just leave a comment below, and I'll go through those, and it helps give me some ideas for what the future videos could be. I've already got a couple of ideas, but your ideas are always welcome. And have fun out there, guys. We'll see you later, and play friendly.